podcast. I'm here once again with Kev. Kev, you've been on this before, but for anybody who hasn't seen you, which I think is odd, but if they haven't, could you tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, name's Kev Milne. I'm a mainframe penetration tester, a cyber threat intelligence manager, father of two and husband to one. And I currently work at NatWest Bank, but I'm also on the weekends very busy running my own sort of training company and providing mainframe security courses and things.
All right,
So
that's quite the resume right there. So mainframe. So we're gonna. I mean, I wanted to bring you on because I wanted to chat about mainframes because mainframes are one of those things that are kind of like a unicorn. You know, I've been in the offensive security world for almost 20 years, and I can probably count the amount of times I've had to deal with a mainframe on one hand in 20 years worth of doing stuff. So it's you don't typically get to see it very often, but that was really weird when I thought about it. So I asked ChatGPT how many mainframes are in existence, and it gave me an answer. It's about 10,000. So why is it that mainframe programming, mainframe penetration testers, why are they so rare to come across?
probably because nobody gets the chance to learn on these things.
Hmm.
So they're sitting there in the bowels of the network, and unless you actually work for a bank or you work for a consultancy company like IBM or maybe Broadcom, nobody actually teaches you any of the mainframe offensive security, especially. Everything you see is about RACF and defensive security and how to secure these things with security managers or just by locking them away in a cage. So this in the last few years has become, I think, far more important, and it's a bit beyond just auditing mainframes. It's just the sort of thing that you see all the time. You see it in presentations all the time as well, and it probably gets a bit boring actually, to be honest.
All right. So for people who don't know, because when I think of a mainframe, I basically my mind always just envisions a server room. You know, when I think mainframe, I think server. What is the difference between a mainframe and just a big server?
To be honest, there's not an awful lot of difference. It costs an awful lot more money for a start. The
Mm,
processing is far faster for a start. They do primarily financial transactions. Um, and when it comes to mainframe hardware, the actual processors, etc., are different. The hard disk drives are slightly different. Everything is bigger, everything is faster, and it doesn't have a GUI for a start. But actually, at the end of the day, a mainframe is just a huge server. I see it more like an ESX chassis. So, for example, an ESX chassis might have 150 virtual machines on it. A
right.
mainframe can be either positioned as one big massive machine or can be split into hundreds of machines. It was the first time that virtual machines were actually built was actually on a mainframe. So yeah, it's bigger, faster, more expensive, but it's still a
All
server
right.
at the end of the day.
Fair enough. That's yeah, that's pretty good. So okay, so you talked about kind of the hardware aspect of it, but when I think of mainframes, I think of very, very legacy types of stuff. Am I in the right ballpark when I think of like COBOL, Fortran, like that type of programming language?
These things still work. So the most important thing about a mainframe, certainly coming from IBM and some of the other big vendors, is the backward compatibility. So something that was written 60 years ago, when really the first proper modern mainframe came out in 1964, the IBM
Mm,
360. It was written, the programs were in COBOL and JCL, job control language. One of the biggest things was there was backward compatibility right
mm.
back to then. So something that was built, written in 1960 will still work on a modern mainframe. There's a
Wow.
huge difference though. I mean, modern mainframes are far more powerful. They'll do 25 billion instructions per second. They're able to do all the financial transactions. You could clear Amazon's entire financial transactions across one mainframe in the space of an hour in the morning. So
Wow.
it can do a lot, and there's more mainframe transactions than there are Google searches in a day. So
Jeez.
although there is backward compatibility, the systems themselves are not legacy. They're just designed to work with any program that has been written over the last 60 years.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so all right, so have an idea of the hardware and some of the languages. What are the modern languages? So you said like 60 years ago, COBOL, Fortran, that sort of thing will still work, but is there an equivalent to like Python
Yeah,
on a mainframe?
absolutely. It'll run all of those. So although we've still got COBOL and Rex and
Hmm.
job control language, etc., Java also works. Python also works. Python's only actually been implemented this iteration round. They've taken
Hmm.
ages to get round to it. But yeah, Python will work, Java works, HTML. There's web application servers there. There's APIs that will connect into the mainframe. Absolutely anything that you want to do with a standard web server or database, it can all go in the mainframe. And a lot of the times, people don't realize the mainframe is the center of everything that's going on and the center of mobile applications, web applications, etc. So all those program languages have got to work in order to be able to connect to the mainframe.
That's actually that's perfect segue into my question that I was curious about. So in my line of work, when you're breaking into a building, and oftentimes the client says, "See if you can get to the server." Okay, fine. So you get into a building, you get to the server. Worst case scenario, if you were maybe not worst case, but a potential bad case scenario is that if you were a bad actor, you could fry the server, take it down, that sort of thing. And if that happens, that company usually has problems, right? Maybe they have to go to their backup, or maybe their website goes down, or anything. What would happen if a mainframe went down? Like what's the potential? What's the difference between if I take down a server in a location versus a mainframe?
Okay, so one of the most important things that I look at is red teaming and cyber scenarios. All right, so let's imagine that a mainframe went down,
Hmm,
okay, in a big financial company,
right.
such as a bank, and that can be just about any bank. At the back end, you have a DB2 database, and you've probably got KICS, which is the Customer Information Control System, which is then connected through an API. So let's look at the things that will break if somebody encrypted that DB2 database. Say a bit of ransomware got in, they encrypted
Hmm,
that. Mobile applications won't work for the company. Web applications won't work for the company. None of the banking will work for the company. The ATMs won't work. You won't be able to do any batch processing, which means you won't be paid. You won't be able to pay rent. You won't be able to get your mortgage. You won't be able to do anything at all. And that is the low risk catastrophic impact if someone does that.
Okay,
So
so
mainframe's the middle of everything.
significantly worse than if I just messed with a random server in a building, like at some company. Now,
Yeah, yeah.
this actually gets to a different question. So, okay, so you could basically everybody who uses that bank is now screwed. You know, you can't use your ATM, you can't pull out cash, you can't make transactions. But businesses obviously use banks. So does it go the other way as well? Like could I even just bring cash that I had to the grocery store? Because the grocery store still uses a bank, right, for their transactions. So if they use the same bank, would that still affect them as well?
You would be you would have to go back to a cashless society for a
Mm,
short while at least. And the problem is, where do you get the money from?
mm,
Unless you've already got that money out, you're not going to be able
right.
to take money out the ATMs in general because
Jeez.
it's not going to be able to do any of those transactions.
So I suspect that this is why mainframes are protected the way that they are. You know, like I've done a lot of PCI compliance testing, and you have all this network segmentation and everything else. I suspect that this is literally the reason. Now, in most servers, they're going to have backup servers offsite, things like this in case of ransomware. Do you do the same type of thing with mainframes, or is it just we have one?
Yeah, so generally you've got multiple what we call LPARs, which are logical
Mm,
partitions.
mm,
That's one thing, and also you've got likely, if you're a big enough bank, you're going to have a mainframe in one area, and obviously you're going to have a mainframe in some other part of the, you know, city or country, etc. So, I mean, obviously we've got all that sort of stuff. The other thing that you're very likely to have is what we call immutable backup.
Mm,
So, some sort of vault, cyber vault of some sort that is maybe something that you could take snapshots of all of your data
mhm,
2 or 3 hours before, and that will only take, because the mainframe is so fast, you can
mm,
probably take a snapshot of all your data in the space of 2 or 3 minutes. So
mm.
that
Interesting.
is something that you, and be able to put it back exactly at that point, and an immutable backup cannot be tampered with because it's protected. So you know back to
Right.
that time you are okay. But I mean, you know, if your backups last night, you've
Right.
lost 12 hours worth of transactions, especially if your transactions go through at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So walk me through this. So you have somebody either through the internet or probably more realistically physically, because mainframes are always air gapped and isolated and what have you. So somebody gets into a mainframe and they encrypt it, ransomware it, whatever. What is the downtime between, okay, the mainframe's gone offline for some reason, we encrypted it, we whatever. How long does it take to typically get that back up and running and people can use their bank accounts again?
That is very much dependent on the company, I would say. So that
Mm,
that makes it pretty difficult. You've got DORA in the EU, which says
yeah.
you've got to be back up and running in 2 hours.
Okay.
Is it possible to get back up and running in 2 hours by the time that you've got the amount of logistics that you've got to get in place just for the communications?
Right.
So you'll have all sorts of different teams that have to interact and deal with all of this sort of stuff. So you'd be very lucky to get back up in 2 hours. And in fact, I've seen mainframes in the past, in the last 10, 12 years, go down
Hmm.
through maybe patches that were
Mm,
wrongly implemented, perhaps,
okay.
and that's caused some sort of hardware issue.
Mm.
And it's taken a whole week to get back up and running, and that has caused
Wow.
pandemonium. And then 3 or 4 months of fallout from that sort of thing after that.
So, okay, so weeks where no one can use their credit cards, ATM machines, or anything like that.
It can certainly be, I would say, up to a week sometimes. Yeah.
Jeez.
As I said, if some ransomware hits and your timing is wrong on your backup, for example,
Mm,
you have a lot of encrypted data that could be just not available. So you then need to make decisions on, do we just go for the restore right away? What do
mm,
we do in relation to the forensics? How do we know someone got in? What did they do?
right,
How did they do it? Because you
right.
could get in through phishing attacks, you could get in
Mm,
through other things like that as well. So I mean, if I was, for example, looking at an attack, I would probably look at a spear phishing attack in the same sort of way as any sort of red teaming would be undertaken. I'd just
right.
go for a different. I'd go for the mainframer as opposed to just the admin.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. So you said that, because of patching and other things, you've seen mainframes go down in some terrible cases for weeks at a time. Is this a common occurrence or is it like once in a blue moon?
No, it's not common, and you certainly hear about it because everybody's on it. So, for example, your mobile banking would go down, or your web application banking would go down, or the ATMs would stop working, and that is newsworthy content.
Mm,
So you would
yeah, well,
hear
yeah, of
about
course.
it. Yeah.
So, Jesus. All right. So, just one last question because I'm just really curious about this. If I if I transferred money to somebody and their bank went down because of this attack, my bank has moved the money to their bank. Their bank loses the transaction ever occurred. Do I have that correct? That it's just like now I have to, effectively that money's lost forever.
It's probably going to be held in the third party, such as somebody like
Hmm.
CSIS or some of the other credit card companies and things like that.
Interesting.
So it would be held, there would be a log. So if it got transferred, there'd be a log of the fact that it was already transferred.
Okay, well, at least there's that. Jesus. Okay, sorry. I'm wrapping my head around the idea of like nobody can use money for weeks on end and the pandemonium that entails.
So this is it, and there are very few mainframe penetration testers on the
Yeah.
go as well, and because people are, I mean, I think companies are kind of scared to test the mainframe in case something goes wrong, or they believe something might go wrong, and
Right.
therefore we will have a catastrophe on our hands. So
Okay.
that's one of the things.
So that was literally going to be my next question: is why is there so few mainframe pen testers? Because this is obviously a really important field. I mean, nobody has access to money. Like, yeah, that's super important, right? So why is it that you don't have hundreds of thousands of these people everywhere?
As I've said, it's very difficult to learn this, unfortunately, and certainly in the past, it's been very difficult to learn this because if you want to have practice on a mainframe, one, you probably need to work at a bank. Two,
Mhm.
you're probably not going to get to practice on the mainframe
Right.
unless you're lucky enough to have a test LPAR that people don't need to use. Um, you've got what we call ZPDT, which is a developer edition of the mainframe, which can go on a desktop, but it
Uh-huh.
is a nightmare to try and get the licensing for that. And even if you pay
Uh-huh.
$5,000 a year, which is the cost for that, who's going to be able to afford that? So anybody outside of a bank who's going to be given these things is not going to be able to learn penetration testing of mainframes properly. So you get to the front screen, you go, or the login screen, you go, well, what do I do now? Right. So
Right.
people are a bit, and also on the other side, people are wary about letting anybody penetration test a mainframe because one, they might find stuff. They might
Right.
find that old COBOL code or something that the auditor's
Sure.
going to say something about. So, let's have somebody just audit it, keep it a bit mystical, so nobody really finds the problems.
So
Yeah,
so
I
is
mean,
it
I've
so
seen
is it
that in previous banks I've worked at, certainly.
is it accurate to say then that mainframes are kind of like this big game of Jenga where you don't really know there might be one piece holding the whole thing together and nobody really wants to touch it because it could fall over and all self-destruct? Is that like an accurate depiction of a mainframe then?
That is what that is some of the belief that some people
Yeah.
have. So you've got haven't even met mainframe techies who think, oh, you can't scan the mainframe because it'll fall over.
Right.
Well, actually, they're tested to withstand hurricanes, right? So it's not the case that you scan it, it'll fall over. If you've got some old
Mm,
COBOL code, that
right.
code may fall over.
Mm,
But I mean, you've got people who just also believe that by default they are super secure, so there is no point in penetration testing them because nobody knows how to do it. Therefore, nobody's going to be able to break in, so we don't have the same sort of issues as
right.
everybody else. And also one of the things that I'm not so keen on that IBM do is if there is any vulnerabilities raised, they keep it completely quiet. In fact,
Mm,
they can hit you with a cease and desist, right? So
wow.
there's no responsible disclosure with regards to this. And I have said to people in the past that that's not a great thing because one company may know there's an issue and IBM may talk to that company, but it means
Right.
that there may be vulnerabilities elsewhere and nobody knows about it because it's kept quiet.
Okay, so all the mainframes or the majority of mainframes all technically owned by IBM then, or is it a software thing?
So IBM has a lot of control over a lot of different things as well, more than you would guess with someone like, so I mean, for example, Linux is open source, so that's
Mm,
absolutely fine. You can use any PC you want. Same for Windows, right?
right.
Microsoft are happy with responsible disclosure. However, IBM are pretty much fully in control of the software that goes on these mainframes, and they are the guys who build the hardware for these mainframes
Mm,
as well. There's hardly any other hardware built by other vendors. So IBM do have a lot of control over everything in the mainframe space, more
interesting.
so than most.
All right. So I know you can't say, but maybe I can get you to say one thing. Are you aware of any mainframe vulnerabilities that the public wouldn't know about? Not asking for the specifics, just curious if you do.
I'm aware of lots of mainframe configuration issues
Hmm,
for a
interesting.
start. Um,
Interesting.
when it comes to let's look at buffer overflows, right? Buffer
Mm,
overflows, you are more likely to get them in old code that is
right.
designed to work from years ago, and actually it's never been updated because they want it to just work, right? So the
Mm,
security input validation and other things aren't there.
right.
With regards to other things on the mainframe, there are certainly lots of misconfigurations that happen. IBM are always keen to say we've got quantum cryptography, we've got pervasive encryption, which is absolutely incredible stuff.
Mm,
However, who rolls it out? How many companies actually roll all this stuff out? Because they want to make sure they're backward compatible. So if they do that, these are massive projects to upgrade your cryptography on your systems.
interesting. Wait, so are you saying that most modern mainframes are using cryptography?
They have the ability to do quantum cryptography.
Oh,
That is there. That is built in, especially the Z16 and Z17. They have what we call Telum processors, so they don't use Intel processors or ARM processors. These are massive processors that do have artificial intelligence built onto the chip as well, so they can do automatic what we call AI inferencing. So if a transaction goes through, it can check the transaction in microseconds to check to see if it looks correct before it lets
huh.
it pass through. It's got all that. And they've also got something called pervasive encryption. So it not doesn't just encrypt each file. It's
Hmm,
set, you can do anything you want with the files, but it also encrypts the contents of the file as it goes separately. So you may
huh.
have access to the file, but you don't have access to the contents of the file. So because they're
Wow.
fast enough, you can do all this sort of stuff.
That's actually really fascinating. Do you think that the majority of mainframes today have this technology, or is it just like the stuff that your Fortune 100 companies are running?
So for example, if you have an IBM mainframe, generally you're going to be updating it.
Hmm,
So let's look at the IBM Z14,
hmm.
which came out, I think, around about 10 years ago. Is that right? Yeah, around about 10 years ago. You can now buy one of those for $4,500 on eBay,
Wow.
right? Everybody has really pretty much updated to the Z16 or the
Hmm,
Z17. So when you do that, those are the ones with the Telum processors and the potential to do all of this and the software to do all of that as well.
hmm.
So when people say mainframe legacy, it really, the hardware itself is not. Some of the code might be. And that is not the
Interesting.
code coming from IBM. That is because financial services or some, healthcare or other companies may run code that is
Hmm.
old.
So, okay, so banks typically are not hurting for money. They typically have plenty. If it were me, and I'm trying to solve this problem of why are there not enough pen testers in this field, why wouldn't the bank just pay that 5,000 a year license, get some type of little mainframe so that their people can practice on? Like, why wouldn't you do that? Why don't you see that?
It's I think the reason is they're completely so there's two ecosystems here really. There's the standard world of security and Linux, Unix, Windows, and you've
Hmm,
got mainframe. And they've got, they're although they're two separate ecosystems, they're also two separate cultures, right?
hmm,
And so you don't really have a security team who are going, right, okay, we need to do things on the mainframe. They go, we don't understand what the mainframe is. We'll leave it to the mainframe guys. The mainframe guys don't think about having security testers internally, right? Because they're
hmm.
doing mainframe stuff and they're doing rack
Right.
F stuff. So I think it's that the whole cultures are completely separate. It's not until you get someone who thinks about both cultures and has a foot in both to go,
Right.
wait a minute, we need to do this. And I think luckily for me, at my bank, they are thinking this way. Hence the reason they went, "Hey, we'll pay for you to have this
Hmm.
kit." Right?
Interesting. Okay, so that's okay. That's good to know that at least some banks are doing that, or actually like thinking ahead and actually getting in front of this problem. So that actually brings me to another question. So I have a substantial amount of experience in cyber pen testing. I've got a lot of experience in covert entry. If I were to get physical access to a mainframe, I know what I would do to a server. But could I realistic now? Yes, of course, you can always just fry the thing or set it on fire or something. But could I realistically plug into a mainframe and actually do anything, or is that skill like beyond the average person?
Like with a rubber ducky or a
Yeah, like a
bash
rubber
bunny
duck or a
or
bash bunny or something, or what,
yeah,
or just
any of those sort of
plug a
things.
keyboard or whatever.
Yeah. To be honest, no.
Hmm,
It does have a Unix subsystem. It runs
hmm,
ZOS, okay,
hmm,
ZOS, right, or ZOS. It has a Unix subsystem, which runs Bash or
hmm.
Z shell.
Right.
But the USB interface doesn't work in exactly the same way as it would in a Linux or Windows server. So you'd have to set all of these things up. And
Hmm,
because that is not a standard interface that anybody would plug into a mainframe,
right.
it's generally not set up. Then your scripts that you want to run would
Right.
have to be probably in Rex, or
Hmm,
they'd have to be in although you could run bash scripts, they would be slightly different and they'd have
hmm,
to be uploaded to the server. So by the time you're able to do that, there's no point in getting to the thing and plugging a
yeah,
USB key in. You've already done what you need to do, or you've got no chance of doing that. So it's not impossible,
right.
but it doesn't work in exactly the same way, and you're probably going to find that it's disabled.
Interesting. So if you had turned evil, how would you attack a mainframe? Would you do it through the internet? Would you do it through an insider threat? Would you go physically get physical access to it? What would your recommendation be?
So the biggest threat for me, um, especially these days, is the insider threat. I mean,
Hmm,
you've got spear phishing attacks, etc. But one
right.
of the things that certainly most of the banks that I talk to as a cyber threat intelligence manager worry about are
Hmm,
people like the DPRK, who are placing insiders into infrastructure roles or developer roles,
right.
just first of all to make money for the North Korean government. And then
Sure.
secondly, once the timing is absolutely right, they are then placing ransomware in the any of the systems that are relevant,
Hmm,
and then ransoming, putting ransoms up and things like that. So I mean, if I thought about somebody who was an insider threat against the mainframe and was
hmm,
able to position themselves in that and then be able to deploy ransomware at that point, that would be
right.
pretty catastrophic, really, especially if they will go, see, we're off.
Interesting. Okay. So would you say that this is a threat that's been picking up, or is it about the same, like say 10 years ago? Is the threat getting more common, about the same, or less?
It's hugely increased in the last year, and,
Interesting.
and especially coming from North Korea. That's something they've thought, we can with the use of artificial intelligence, they
Hmm,
can hide themselves. So they're actually managing to get positions in companies that are technical positions. They're working for a little while, and then they're placing ransomware attacks in there. And this is becoming
hmm.
attempts to get into banks, financial institutions, healthcare, other places like that are becoming far more common. I think I read something that a company had over 1,000 applications coming that they'd noted had come from North Korea, um,
Wow.
that had been rerouted via United States or Europe.
Huh. So you have a single company that had over 1,000 applications from somebody well, I mean, it's not just a random guy, but somebody from the South Korea or the North Korean government. That's
Yeah,
insane. That's insane.
absolutely. They are trying pretty heavily. So they've got laptop farms, and
Right.
laptop farms will maybe be held in places like United States, and they'll be
Mm,
residential, right? And
mm,
things we're sort of looking for are specific VPN types coming
mm.
in relation to cyber threat intelligence. And there are a few other indicators that we look for that would say that this is actually a North Korean threat actor coming in and where they are. But unfortunately, we've got the skills and the tools and the backing to be able to do that sort of thing. A lot of smaller companies will have absolutely no chance of
Ah,
knowing what they're looking for or how to stop anybody doing this sort of stuff.
right. That's interesting. And I obviously with the advent of AI, I assume that's only going to get worse. I mean, I'm sure we all heard about that poor guy in what was it, Hong Kong, who got tricked into transferring millions and millions of dollars because he thought the CTO or somebody was telling him to do it on FaceTime or Google or whatever it was. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. AI is allowing um, bad actors to translate and respond to
Mm,
interview questions in real
right.
time, and also it's all able to change their facial features and things like that as well. So and it's only going to get tougher.
Right. Yeah, of course. So just if I have this correct, the biggest threat to mainframe are insider threats and probably ransomware specific. Is that about right?
I would, yes. I mean, I think so. I think so. I mean, if someone can encrypt if someone can get into the mainframe and encrypt the mainframe,
Right.
then it will do it so quickly that
Yeah.
you're going to have, because it processes so quickly that
Right.
you could certainly encrypt the mainframe very quickly, and that the data that you hold on there is important, confidential PII
Right.
and financial data, right?
And do you
And also, nothing is able to connect to that financial data and
Mm,
customer data in order to make anything else work. So the distributed systems around it suddenly go down as well. They stop working.
right. Well, yeah, that's that's a cascading catastrophic failure. Um i- and the backups that you mentioned, like when you want to bring the mainframe back online by going back to a checkpoint. Is that something that's on the mainframe, or is that like a special USB or something that you have to bring in from a vault?
Yeah, so you've examples are things like CyberVault, for example. Those
Mm,
are um, hardware. I mean, a lot of them are hardware devices that will instantaneously store off the mainframe
mm,
your information, but you'll be able to put that back. I know you're talking terabytes, petabytes at a time
right.
that you'll be able to save and recover quickly to a certain level. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well,
Because, I
that's
mean, you
fascinating.
can't have your backup. You wouldn't want your backups on the mainframe either, because obviously you'll probably encrypt those as well. So yeah, they are off mainframe, but certainly very accessible.
Interesting. Man, that's so okay. So these hardware devices, are they kept in the same location as the mainframe, or are they kept like off-site somewhere, or how does that work?
Multiple.
Okay. All
So
right. Good.
so you're gonna
That makes
have a
sense.
bit of both. I mean, if a plane hit your data center or a bomb hit your data center or some earthquake or something like that took your data center out, you want to make sure that you've got a data center somewhere else,
Mm,
not
right.
even in the same country, probably, certainly not in the same city, that is
Yeah.
able to transfer and keep the business going,
Interesting. God,
without
like
manual intervention, hopefully.
yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about, I'm thinking about all the instances where I've made it into server rooms, but I don't think that I could do a tenth or a hundredth or a thousandth of the damage if I could, ransomware a mainframe based on this. Like I mean, how many people would be affected by that? It's not just like, okay, Facebook went down. It's no, this is like nobody who has any bank account, credit card, whatever, literally can't anywhere in the world can't use their card for possibly weeks at a time. That's catastrophic, man. So one of the things I've never programmed a mainframe before. I've definitely never pen tested a mainframe before. Um, I have been in the room with one, but that was about the it. But in preparation for this call, I scoured the internet and I tried to find some like hack the box or something that I could go look at and poke at about mainframes. Like, oh, here's a toy, fake mainframe that you can poke at and do stuff with. I could not find a single thing, nothing. Why? Why is that? Why is like it's such a weird area where it's so important, but there's no resources.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. So you've got two things. You've got IBM Red Books, which are all designed, to show you how to build a mainframe, and unfortunately, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, so they're difficult to get through, and they don't tell you how to do any penetration testing as such. The information that you're probably looking for would probably be coming from two or three guys: Mark Wilson, Philip Young, who's Soldier of Fortran, and Chad Rickensroot, who is Big Endian Smalls. And they are spread across YouTube channels, Tumblr, absolutely everywhere. So one of the things I wanted to do was basically write a book on mainframe hacking, and I'm doing that for No Starch Press. It's quite a hefty book, so I'm halfway through it at the moment. But also alongside that, one of the things that was really important to me is if I'm writing something like this, most No Starch Press books, you can just build a lab, right? You build a Windows box, a couple of Linux boxes, some APIs, a web server, etc., etc. But you can't do that, right? So some of
Right.
one, you can't have a mainframe um in your house. Two, you do have something called Hercules, which I kind of learned on for the first year, but it doesn't have TCP networking properly. It doesn't have Unix subsystems. It doesn't have a lot of things that you'd be able to exploit. So I've decided to write a software tool called, which is a simulator, which is, I did call Easy Mainframe, but I've renamed Gibson after
Okay.
hackers film, where there's nothing better than hacking the Gibson. So that will be released on July the 4th. Alongside that, I have also started creating some online labs in the same sort of way as Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. And these are going to be available around about the same time as well. I want to make sure they're absolutely nailed down and they are correct. I've got a couple of guys helping me out with that at the moment, just checking to make sure I'm not off on a tangent, as it were. So yeah, there will be things there soon, but I'm having to basically write them.
So okay, so first off, that's awesome, but and I really like the reference, by the way. I instantly got that. But this is, as far as I know. I mean, I haven't scoured the entire internet, but as far as I could tell, I think this might literally be the first hands-on hack the box esque mainframe pen testing tool that's out there for people. Am I right in saying that?
Uh, it is. It is. So even with Hercules, which is a 1981 version of a mainframe, because that's the only one that IBM would release, and they were forced to do that because they'd collaborated with the US government at that time. So anything you collaborate with the US government, they say you've got to really make that part open source. You can't keep that completely to yourself.
Right.
But this is the only one that allow you to actually hack it. And I'm also writing some other tools, simulated tools that would allow you to go through all the kind of pen testing process as well, and alongside the labs that I've got as well. So yeah, absolutely, it is the first here. Where I was two mainframe pen testing courses. One's run by Broadcom, which is pretty much Chad. It used to be Evil Mainframe. So Chad and Philip Young sold that on to Broadcom. They've got that, which is fine, but you've really pretty much got to be a Broadcom
Right.
customer to be able to
Right.
access it. So the other one is I've written another one,
Yeah. So
and I'm running that course.
Yeah, so tell me about that because okay, so if I got that dates right, you got July 4th. You're publishing the Gibson so that people can poke at it, and then you've got a book coming out, which we don't know when that's coming out yet. But then you've also got a course coming out on how to actually do this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So the mainframe offensive security tester course, I've run it a few times, and this is the first time I'm publicly running it. Um, so it is absolutely up to date. I've
Mhm.
actually changed some of the information in the course. I've updated it. I've also updated the systems. I've made it more relevant, and I've made it more relevant to open source intelligence, not
Mhm.
just mainframe hacking itself, but how would you go about going through the entire process of penetration testing a mainframe, and what's the different things that you're actually looking for, going straight through to being able to use the mainframe, and the simulator will do all that. You'll be able to put in all the commands that you need, etc. And some of the other mainframe penetration testing tools, I've simulated versions of those. So, you'll be able to set up your own lab. It'll be almost, it doesn't take up any space, barely
Mhm.
takes up any memory, and it'll just be something you can download from GitHub, and some course notes will be there. It'll be slightly different from the mainframe offensive security tester course notes, which will be far more in depth, but there'll be stuff there that people can now start to go, all right, so this is what mainframe's like. These are some of the tools, and you'll be able to simulate that sort of thing as well. So
So,
yeah.
your course not only teaches people how to do this, but because of Gibson and the other stuff, you actually can do this. You can actually practice it, like hands-on type of like labs, not just theoretical stuff.
Yeah, I've developed Gibson to be something that you can practice penetration testing and running mainframe commands on. And it will. So, for example, if you type OMVS, it'll drop you into an equivalent Unix subsystem, right?
Mm,
Something Hercules just can't do.
mm,
So it will look and feel exactly like a mainframe. Obviously there's certain things that it won't be able to do. It won't be able to do all your financial transactions, etc. But hopefully, with the community take up, they'll be able to add extra let me see, scripts or commands or other things like that. And it's been designed to make it really easy to be able to add extra commands in and help it do other things.
interesting. So, all right. So, who is this class for? I mean, obviously, people who want to do mainframe programming, but or sorry, pen testing. But do you need 5 years of experience doing like various types of programming? Do you have to be have an OSCP for pen testing? Like, who is this for? Like, what level of expertise?
Yeah, it's as long as you have Linux skills
Mm,
and you have some understanding of network security or networking, even if you know what an IP address is, if you know know a little bit of Linux, if you understand what a mainframe is supposed to do, right?
mm,
So it's really almost for anyone. If you're pivoting into cybersecurity,
mm,
mainframes are probably one of the things you want to be thinking about, because if you want to be a pen tester, for example, being able to pen test a mainframe is going to give you a bit of an advantage. If you're a mainframer, right,
mm,
understanding security, mainframe security, 'cause some of the mainframers are all very siloed. They do their one does RACF, maybe one does kicks, one they all do separate things. If you get a much better understanding of the all-round security of mainframes and how an attacker might attack you, that is useful. So who's it for? It's for penetration testers, people pivoting into cybersecurity and want to do this sort of thing. And it's also for mainframers at the other side who want to understand what attackers are doing and how you might penetration test the mainframe that you work on every day.
interesting. Okay, that's actually that seems pretty broad. Like it seems like anybody can get into it. But here's a question for you. So, according to ChatGPT, there's around 10,000 mainframes on Earth today. how many pen testers do you think currently exist to penetrate, a mainframe?
So I would say, as part of the Mainframe Hacker Society, there's
Yeah.
about 20 odd people there. And the ones who you would really test, that you would really trust to
Yeah.
not break a mainframe or do something silly, would be 8 or 9 people at
Okay.
the minute, I would say. You've got some guys who are absolutely amazing, like Phil Young, Soldier of Fortran. You've got Chad
Mm,
Rickensrud who runs these things. The thing is that so they work for companies such as NetSpy and people
mm,
like that. And also you've got Mark Wilson, who's got 40 years of experience, who is those guys are mentors to me because I've got 3 years experience. But
mm.
overall, you're talking probably 9 or 10 people.
Okay, so you have 10,000 mainframes on Earth. We have 10 guys who can actually do the pen test that you would trust. That definitely seems to be a knowledge gap. It seems to be a job issue there. So that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the take up. I mean, I mean, I did a poll, for example, and I think it was just over 60% came back on the poll saying of penetration testers and cybersecurity professionals, we would be interested in doing penetration testing of mainframes. We
Mm,
just don't have the knowledge and don't know where to get it.
right.
14% believed it was legacy. And, I think the other 16 or 17% believed it was there was other things more important. So the vast majority of us, we do think this is important, but we don't know where to learn any of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, until literally until your course, when I was prepping for this call, I didn't know where it was. I asked ChatGPT, I went to Google, I went to every source I could think of, and it, I could find nothing. I literally could find nothing on mainframe hacking, mainframe pen testing, and definitely no labs. So I'm actually really excited about this. I'm really, really, and so with your course, as I understand it, your course is coming up soon, right?
Yeah. It
What,
is.
what's the
Fifth,
what's the
fifth and
date?
sixth, yeah, absolutely. 5th and 6th of July. So it will. It's the 4th of July that Gibson gets released. That's
Wow.
not a deliberate thing. That just happens to be completely coincidental. But 5th and 6th, it's got to be released on GitHub to ensure that some of the people on the course they will have complete access to a
Mm,
mainframe in my infrastructure, a real mainframe. So it's not like they're not going to be using a real mainframe, but also
right.
they'll have access to Gibson as well, and also my training labs as
Mm,
well. So those will run through assessments, and they'll also run through all the OSINT stuff and all the Nmap specific Nmap commands that are useful for mainframe and all the rest of the things that are there. So it's going to be a really diverse, varied course that brings you through absolutely everything and uses all the tools that are at my disposal and I've created
mm.
to ensure that people can learn in a fun environment. And yeah, yeah,
And so
that's
you're so given the fact that you are literally the only person who is doing this publicly, or at least for the general public, how often are you intending on running these courses?
I'm looking to do it once a month at the
Oh
weekend.
wow. Okay.
I thought about do I do it during the week, but obviously I'm fully employed and
Sure.
happily fully employed as well. And I worried slightly about doing these at the weekends because I thought maybe people wouldn't be interested in doing that. And certainly in the UK, you do have a culture of, well, my weekend is my weekend. But however,
Right.
I have found that in a lot of other countries, especially the States, if people want a holiday,
Yeah.
they want their holiday. If
Right.
they're doing extra training for themselves, they're
Right.
happy to do that at the weekend. So
Yeah. No. Well, as an
that
American, I can vouch for that. You're absolutely right there. All right, Kev. I know that you have a hard break. You got to leave for an appointment. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. I'm really excited about your course. Mainframe hacking is something that I've always been interested in, but I've never had an outlet or resource to do it. Where can people go to find more about your course and about you?
Yeah, okay, so you can look me up on LinkedIn, just Kev Milne, but you can also go to offensivesec.org, and that is where the other courses, as soon as they are there, will be up and running. So yeah, offensivesec.org.
Perfect.
And when the labs come out, things that those will be at labs.offensivesec.org. Um, I'm still deciding how much, whether I charge for those or what I'm going to do. But if I do, it's going to be like $10, right? Full for it forever, right?
Wow,
So
that's
it's not instructor-led training, but it's something that people will get the chance to play about with. And
yeah,
I'm all for hands-on learning.
that's very generous of you, and I think there's going to be a lot of audience out there who's very very interested in this subject. I think this subject has been off limits to the vast majority of people until now, and I think that you're going to see. I hope that you're going to see a big, a huge base of people who are going to pour in and try to get into this because it's really interesting. It's really fascinating. One last question. You mentioned that you may have more courses in the future, like you might be creating more things in the future. Do you have any plans for anything, anything beyond what you've already put together?
Um, I'm still I'm still thinking about that because I'm so busy at the moment. There's obviously lots of red teaming courses and various other things like that. So there might be some sort of red teaming ones that divert off into mainframe though. So it would have
Mm,
to be very specific because there's already lots of people who do that sort of thing.
right.
Um, Industrial control systems are absolutely fascinating, and obviously with some of the issues, I call it an issue, with the war in Ukraine and with everything that's geopolitically going on at the moment, I think defense and attack of these systems is very important. But I don't want to be one of these PowerPoint presenter guys who doesn't know anything about it. It would take me a bit of time to do the research and go on get on the other courses and talk to the right people about that sort of thing and maybe pull them into the company that I've started up as well. And one day I'll definitely want to get on your physical security courses as well because they are awesome. I've
Oh,
heard so many good things about them, so that is something I definitely want to get on to. I've
no,
always been
we
fascinated with that sort of thing as well.
yeah. I mean, we'd love to have you on the physical courses too. All right, Kev. Well, I know you got a hard deadline, man. Thank you very much for taking the time to be on today. And anybody who's interested, please go check out his stuff because Kev, I know it's going to be really good. I'm really excited for it. I'm definitely going to take the course as soon as I can. All right, Kev. Well, thank you again, and thanks everybody for being here.
Perfect.
Bye.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye, guys.